Hello, welcome. This is officially the second episode of Fellowship of the Golden Age. And today we have Iulian Damien. Hi, Iulian.
Hello, Neptune, and good to see you.
Yeah, it's so good to see you too. You always look like little words whenever we're communicating, but now I get your face and it's lovely to see you.
Yes.
So, the Fellowship of the Golden Age is a series of videos where, at this point, I'm interviewing other Ascended Master students, and the commonality is that we all follow Ascended Master teachings, which are mainly coming through Kim Michaels, and that's the commonality of our experience. So sometimes there's going to be certain terms that come up, and we'll do our best to explain it if it's someone who's outside the teachings who's seeing this. But the whole idea is to show that we're all a part of the beautiful diamond of oneness, and to show all the different facets of where we're all at. And to see the different perspectives that each of us have, and to see where we are in our progress as spiritual beings without judgment of anybody, just seeing the beauty of who we all are. So with that said, I would like to now get to know my beloved Iulian. And so would you just start off, Iulian, by just sharing a little bit about your personal history? So the cultural influences, the identity influences, your family background. Just give us a bit of a description of that, always bearing in mind of, how that's affected you as a spiritual being.
All right. So I was born in Romania, 1972. The country at that time was under a communist regime. So I remember that there was a general energy in the mass consciousness of Romanians of, I would say, fear and hiding. And then as a child, I experienced quite strongly this energy. And I remember that I was also very shy, very like an introvert. I did not dare to express myself. My parents didn't have what we call a good relationship between them, so that affected me a lot as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to go into details about my parents here. I just want to say that I was deeply affected by the dynamic in the family. I didn't feel I was loved enough. I was, on the contrary, I was punished. I felt I was neglected many times. So I grew up in a way that made me accept a certain image about myself, which was basically the image that I'm a victim. I saw myself as a victim of circumstances that I cannot control. And I also felt like I was powerless to do anything about it. So I would say that for most part of my childhood, basically this was the dominant image that made me experience experiences that I didn't like. Later in my life, I understood that when you have such a sense of identity, you actually attract those experiences to you, because it's a confirmation of what you hold in your mind as your beliefs. Anyway, for a long time, I also had a feeling of not belonging. Somehow, somewhere in a part of my mind, I could sense that there was a time, a distant time, somewhere that I could not say for sure what it was, but I felt that I experienced much better conditions, a much better life. Even the idea that there was a life before this life was quite alive in me. And I felt that I ended up in a place that is very scary, with a lot of fear, then I couldn't do much about it. So was not an easy childhood. What else about my childhood?
Were there any religious influences or?
My mother, she was a religious woman, not my father. My father embraced what's called a materialistic life view. He just wanted to have a good life and have experiences that will give him some fulfillment and satisfaction. With my mother, I remember that she used to go to the church. Romania is mostly like the Orthodox Christian church. And she took me with her several times. And my experience was quite mixed. I remember that I hated as a child to stay through a long mass and hear all the priests had to say and the singing, and it just was very long. I just wanted to be outside and play. In the same time, I was very attracted. What made an impression on me was the incense in the church. They used to burn like frankincense and myrrh. And then the vitrals, the church where we used to go, that it had beautiful vitral, the stained glass, that I used to look at it for a long time. And then I also liked a lot the bells when they sounded the bells. It was almost like bringing some memories, some deeper memories as well.
Lovely.
In the same time, I could not embrace the view, the beliefs from the church as my mother tried to convey them to me. There was this image, basically what I saw, because I had conversation with my mother, and she said that she thought herself to be a sinner and that she would go to hell after the end of her life. And that was very surprising. And I asked her why she would go to hell, because I thought she was a good person and a loving mother. And she said that only very few people go to heaven, maybe some very righteous priest or someone that really is able to live like what was considered a pure life without doing any sin. But if you sin, if you make a mistake, then you are doomed to go to hell.
Wow. So what was your impression on that? Like, what was your inner understanding of what she was saying? Like, how did you interpret that? What did you see at that time?
Well, it did not resonate with me at all, and I refused to accept that picture. I felt that it cannot be such a God that because you made a mistake will just punish you forever and will send you to this reality. It's called hell. I feel that the God that I sense must be different than a punishing God, because this is the image that was projected through the church, that it's a very strict God, and he can't wait for you to make a mistake to just send you to hell and keep you there forever. So naturally, because I did not accept this image, as I grew up, when I started to read books and I looked for literature, I looked for different perspectives. And then I found later on Buddhist teachings. And then there were even some descriptions of hell and heaven. And they very much equated those with states of mind. And I like that description very well, because it resonates to me that hell was not like very much like a physical place, as Christians imagine, at least my mother, but it's like a state of mind in which, depending on the experience you have, positive or negative emotions, you can experience a peaceful state of mind, or what's called love, or you can experience negative emotions, which is more like a hellish state of mind. So that made a lot of sense to me, resonated, and I embraced that view at that time. And it helped me move on without feeling of guilt or self-pity deprecation about myself, that I'm going to end up like my mother, or the Christians that embrace this view.
Okay. So I'm about to ask you about your path to the Ascended Masters, but before we go there, could you just give just a description for of who are the Ascended Masters? We're remembering, anyone could be watching this interview.
It's an interesting question. Well, I see them as my friends, as my brothers and sisters. I used to have a different picture. Maybe some years ago, I saw them more like much above me, like some strict masters that will accept you based on certain conditions. And but I was able to drop that image. So I see them as being available for me, and I think for everyone. They are ready to connect with us at all times, and they are our friends and our guides, and are ready to give us like an insight or whatever we need if we make a call to them. And then it depends on our openness and our attuning into them to actually receive that thing from them. And I personally feel a certain level of connection, and I'm receiving often guidance or inspiration from them. So that's where I am in this relationship.
Yep. And I'm just going to add to that the Ascended Masters are beings like Jesus and Mother Mary. We've heard of these names, beings who are no longer in physical embodiment. Many of them have been in a physical embodiment, and they've risen above the pull of duality that affects us all here on earth, the fallen consciousness and the impact of believing that we're separated from one another, and they have risen above that. And when you think about Jesus and the impact that he had, just one man who stood up and rose above that dualistic pull and showed that he is more than that. And in his own time, he really wasn't such a big person. Like, he really didn't have the impact we think that we imagine he had. But think about it, he's still one of the most known people from history across our planet. So they serve as our teachers. They're here to go stick out their hand with wisdom and to help us to reach out and rise above the damage in our psychology and start to see ourselves in a real light and heal ourselves and rise above the lower pulls of, the lower pulls of duality.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So with that, what drew you in towards these teachings? Can you describe a bit about how you discovered the teachings and what that meant to you? And
so I felt I was drawn to spirituality very early in my life. I was a teenager and I started to read. First of all, my first books were like about positive thinking. So I realized that there was a great power in being able to change your thinking, in controlling, first of all, this flow of thoughts, and realizing that you can think more consciously, basically, and project something out there without necessarily being drawn into this flow of thoughts that always goes through our minds. Because I realized if you grow up in a culture like I grew up in, there are a lot of thoughts in mass consciousness that can run through your mind, and you don't even know where they come from. You may think they are yours. But then there is a moment when I feel it happened some while ago, when I realized that basically I can take control over my thoughts, and I can choose the thoughts I want to think. And then those books about positive thinking basically were saying that if you choose and hold on to those positive thoughts, you will attract a different life experience. And I verified that. I said, well, this is very much true. It's just it's not easy to make the switch. It's like a gradual shift, and it takes time and it takes effort, but it's possible. And I feel that that was, in a way, for me, the biggest shift in my life was to switch from the identity of being a victim to a different identity of being what I would say the creator of my life, like
Yes.
saying, hey, I create my life. I decide what I want to experience. I'm not at the mercy of experiences that come to me from the world. So that was the biggest shift for me. I still have elements of discussions of victim when I see reactivity in myself, but I'm in a so much better place today than I used to be, let's say, 20 years ago. So I can clearly see, as the Ascended Master said, that the path is a gradual path.
Yeah.
It has two elements. Like it takes effort, the effort to look at oneself, to look at one's psychology, to discover all those beliefs, to do the invocations and decrees, to clear, to purify. But also there is an element of grace. So I don't feel that I could succeed in releasing all those without actually some grace, some light coming from above. So there is necessary to be connected to it, the Ascended Master, with a hierarchical light in order to be successful in this work. Otherwise, I feel it can even be taken over by the ego, like thinking that you just do something for yourself. But as you said earlier, and we know, we are all connected, so the picture is so much bigger than what I used to think.
Yeah.
That I'm on a spiritual path by myself, and I will reach some place someday, maybe on a pink cloud or something like this.
Yeah. And did you find, before I started officially following the Ascended Master teachings, with awakened consciousness, I know I was still very much being influenced by the masters. I just didn't really know it. I just knew I was following the right path and always following my heart. I felt, and I wasn't doing things like invocations, invoking light, or actively doing anything other than searching and working on myself. I felt like the impact from the presence of the masters, and I suppose the other people who have been invoking light, that helped to lift me and helped really sort of accelerate the trajectory to get me through to the masters and more connected. Like it was like the light was coming through even though I wasn't actively asking for it. But the difference is once I officially discovered the teachings and began calling on that light and bringing it through, that's when it's been like, acceleration. Everything has gone very, very fast, and it's sort of proof that the teachings are effective. With a really conscious connection with the masters, who can really accelerate in our consciousness. So
related to the connection, so I remember the Ascended Masters saying that they sponsored every single one of us. So I think it's a matter of getting a certain level of maturity or readiness for their teachings. And I don't necessarily feel that it actually even happened in this lifetime. I feel we are connected with them already, but each lifetime we are born and grow up in a certain culture, and then we have to have certain experiences, and we may even be immersed in the world with the experiences it can offer for a while until we have this like awakening or reaching a certain point. And then the Ascended Masters show up and awaken you, and they lead you, because I believe my inspiration to find their teachings came from them. And was just that I reached this level of readiness because I did study many other teachings before, but I can see how it was like a gradual growing and expansion in the knowledge and awareness to actually find the Ascended Master teachings and recognize them and say, hey, this is like real teachings of that can help you to self-transcend yourself. One example I can give, the way I traveled the path for many years is when I saw something I didn't like in myself, or what we call negative emotions or thoughts, I tried to suppress them. I realized I don't want to have this, but I didn't know what to do with it. So my tendency was to suppress. And then as the master described that we create those separate selves. So what I realized that for many years, maybe lifetimes, I don't know, but I created other separate selves to suppress basically what I call the negative separate selves. So there was always like a strong tension in me. Like whenever I felt that I react, I was trying to control the reaction and then show in a certain way, or don't let that reaction. So I felt like I was fighting with myself. I was fighting something in myself with the willpower that I had. So a big liberation for me was the concept of surrender, the idea of surrender as self-transcendence that came through the Ascended Masters. So that basically opened up for me this idea that I don't have to hold on to all this stuff, all this separate stuff. I can simply just surrender. I just need to learn how to do it. And we have the teachings with the separate self that have a thought matrix, and they have this amount of energy that has accumulated when they express themselves. But then the idea, the understanding that came together with the tools that through the invocation and decrees we can actually purify, transmute this energy to the point where we can actually let go. So that was very, very liberating for me. So that was a big switch in my work where I moved from fighting with myself to letting go, to surrender and look at anything and say, well, I have this, but I don't have to hold it. I don't have to hide it. I don't have to fight it anymore. I can just simply let it go, and then it's going to go out, and we'll see something new will come up in place of that. So that was, I think, very transformational for me, the concept of surrender.
Yep, lovely. So because you've brought up separate selves, so could you just take a moment to actually describe what a separate self is, so that someone outside of who doesn't speak the same language, just to describe what your perspective of a separate self is?
Okay. So I see them. Well, I have first to say a little bit. So this comes from teachings, but we have the four lower bodies, which we all have, were given to us, the identity body, the mental, the emotional, and the physical body, and we express our consciousness through them. But then a comparison is like, this is like the hardware. Like if you imagine a computer, this is the hardware. And then you need to put some software to run the computer through some software. And these separate selves like the software. Basically, they go into the hardware and then they start playing out whenever you push the button. Although most of the time, if not all the time, we push unconscious. It's unconscious pushing of the buttons because it's through reactivity. And they are created, and this is, again, it's one of those moments where I had to take responsibility, and was another big shift. Because I remember when I was in the sense of identity of a victim, I used to blame all the time and thinking that the problem is out there, that someone else is to blame for what's happening to me. And ultimately it was God when I follow, the sequence to see where does it go? Who is the ultimate first, the factor responsible for my bad experiences was God, because he created us. He must be responsible for everything that's going on. So the shift was basically to realize that I created all this. It was not God. I created all this. Unconsciously, through my responses to situations, I created all of this. So it was like a big shock. to realize this. But in the same time, it was a huge shift because I realized, well, I have to uncreate this. So it's all on me. So I cannot blame God anymore. In the same time, I can still ask God for help with doing the clearing because I know He can help. So I see them as software. They run a certain program which expresses itself as a reaction, and they have like a thought matrix. I'll give an example. So I had this, as I said earlier. So the thought matrix of the sense of identity I had as a child was basically I am a victim.
Yep.
And then the all kind of thoughts associated with that, many negative thoughts and then many negative emotions. And on the physical level, I was experiencing very unpleasant experiences. Basically, that's what it led to. So was a program that ran for a long time. Still, there are some remnants of it, but I feel much of it is gone. And I do believe that I did not create it in this lifetime. I feel that it's a deeper program because I resonate very well with the idea of lifetimes past embodiments. And I know that I have experienced embodiments where life was even harder than what I experienced in my childhood. If we just look at the history of Earth and what was going on with, a lot of wars and barbaric tribes plundering, and basically life was not easy. So Earth was pretty much a field of very atrocious things that happened. Yes. And I believe that I and all of us, we've been part of this, although we don't have much memory of it now. So the victim program probably was already set there, as the master said, maybe from my first embodiment when I experienced some trauma.
Yep.
With the encounter with the fallen beings, and it ran from there, and creating more and more ramifications and other programs attached to it that made it into something quite significant to affect my experience and my feeling of myself in the world.
Would you describe the victim consciousness, that victim self, to be the primal self, to be the linchpin of all the others, or?
It's an element. I would say the main element, although a variation for me was that it came with a strong feeling of injustice. Basically, it's not just that this happened to me, and why did it happen? Why is it happening? So I felt that it shouldn't have happened, that because of my limited understanding, I felt that if there is a God, God should have not allowed this to happen. Like that I suffer, that other people suffer, that this is not fair. But because I did not understand, and this is another very important aspect of my growing awareness through the teachings of the Ascended Master, I understand a lot about free will and how it manifests on planet Earth. And this was an amazing opening to understand all those things. I think without this knowledge, I would have remained pretty much trapped in this sense of identity, of injustice, that something is not right, that it's wrong that we experience suffering. Yeah.
Yeah, and then that process of when we recognize like that it's not that other person that's causing me to suffer, like we see brutal things happen, and there's that sense when we're trapped in that self, like this is how I used to see it. I'd look out and I'd be like, why are they doing this? It just seems so wrong. And it was causing, the projections that were coming out was causing suffering, and I would think that it was their fault. And also there was another element that I was I'd go out of my way to try and change that other person's behavior. So since discovering like what the key is of this primal self, it's just so simple that just to accept the free will, that everyone is entitled to play out their free will however they choose, and that it's only going to hurt me if I let myself take that personally. So the moment for me, the moment that, I can feel any sense of suffering or reaction coming, like, I just make that choice. If I see it, I just make that choice to be like, I can let this go, I can let this die, and I can feel, and then that sense of peace comes through. So we describe that as it's like letting a separate self die, but also transcendence. We can choose something higher in how we respond to what's going on in the world around us. So could you give some of your perspectives on transcendence and letting a separate self die?
Well, I feel that since finding the Ascended Masters teachings and the concepts, and they offer us the very good descriptions and the tools. So for me, so the first step obviously is to recognize that there is something, there is this program. I realized that, well, for many years, they can run unconsciously. I mean, you can act those programs out without never questioning them and thinking it's just, this is who I am, this is how I act, this is normal. Or so it starts by questioning. Questioning is very important, and realizing, hey, I don't have to act like this. This is not normal. It's not normal to have this fear or that fear, or to have so much negativity, or all that we call unpleasant experiences. So it starts recognizing and then making the decision that I want to be free of this. And that's a very important step at the conscious level, to say, hey, I don't want this anymore. And then it may have a lot of other ramifications, like separate self can bring even some benefits. So there is a need to look at all that separate self, the way it manifests, what it brings to one. It can bring attention, it can bring acknowledgement, it can bring, maybe some people imagine that it brings love, because through attention you get something. So it takes a deep look at all the ramifications of a separate self and how it affects my life, making a decision, and then working with the tools. Like, I know that there is a lot of energy, and this is why I feel overwhelmed at times, and I cannot stop a reaction, because this separate self has like a good amount of energy behind it, and it manages to pull on my conscious will. So it takes work at the level of giving the invocations and decrees. And then I feel that is not obvious for me. Is not obvious this moment when I say, oh, I let go of this.
Yeah.
I'm just realizing afterwards, like, I'm realizing, hey, this situation, I used to react to it. It used to trigger me, or this person, and I feel it doesn't. So it's more like this, like my interaction is much more clean, much more neutral. But then I realized that, depending of my level of consciousness, my daily level, for example, when I am tired, I can react more strongly to certain situations than when I am rested, when I have better energy. So there are fluctuations in this. So I feel it doesn't go away right away, and then I also believe that the masters will even tempt us, many times before we prove ourselves that, hey, I really wanted to let go of that, and then by some grace, it just fades in the background. It just dies, and that's how I see this surrendering. So it may take time. I realize it takes patience, because if I feel that I take this work on myself very seriously, and I'm doing all these efforts, and then I don't see results, then I can get disappointed, and I say, but I've been doing all this and all that, and it's still there. So it can be frustrating. So I realized that that's not a good approach with the separate selves.
Mm.
It takes patience and time. It takes recognition in the moment, and the surrender can become even very simple, like just say in the moment, I see it. When I say I surrender, I see it, I know this, and I don't want it. I don't want to be there, and just move on. And it may come again in a different situation.
Yeah.
But just
like that famous saying of Saint Germain that he made a million right choices. Yeah. And so, it's just, we can choose, I'll just go a little bit higher this time, and what else can we do?
Yeah. So it takes a certain momentum, I realized, of doing this practice of surrendering. It needs to become like a way of life. We say that the spiritual way of life is the way of surrendering, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know there are many people that do this. I even got to talk to other people. They don't necessarily know they are Ascended Master students, but they do the practice of surrendering in a different context, or they realize that they have to let go. So it's good to realize that it's a practice that it's the viable practice, the most important practice, and it's known even in other circles of spiritual people. So I'm glad to hear that. And interestingly enough, mostly women know it very well. It seems that men, for some reasons, they want to fight. They are kind of, when you say surrender, they feel kind of shaky. Because it's also some meaning that comes from the master consciousness that you kind of give up when you surrender. It's not something good to do.
Yeah, I was talking with Iulian about this the other day, that probably one of the most the trickiest separate selves that any of us on planet Earth are going to have to deal with, other gender identity that we're born into in this lifetime. Like, that there's just such an impact of what's pushed onto you as a woman and what's pushed onto you as a man. And maybe this might be a good place to go, like for you to present what the impact of the collective mind has pushed onto the man, a spiritual man, and how that impacts you in your life. So you've just described one, that resistance, that fight. Is there anything else that is of relevance?
Well, I remember since I was a child, basically one big thing that is imposed on men basically is restriction on expressing emotions. Basically, there was the saying, men don't cry. So as a little boy, I will be ridiculed if I cry. Because men don't cry, boys don't cry, you show weakness. So since we are children as men, we are trained, depending, that's mostly the mass consciousness, but I believe there are other families that they allow their boys to cry. It's not everywhere. I hope more and more. But basically, there is a restriction in expressing emotions. So I guess that leads a man to become very mental, like thinking a lot and trying to solve everything through the rational mind, the analytical mind, and trying to repress emotions and not show emotions. And that's a big problem, a very big problem that men had to deal with. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like women, we fulfill the emotional part of that. That I think a lot of women, not all, but a lot of women, we feel like, we're so full of emotion that it's the emotional level that impacts us. So yeah, just the dealing of, and that comes out as, this sense, a feeling of being hurt. So the masculine archetype will play out sort of more of a mental maybe irritated or angry response, and then the feminine one is just this very soft, hurt, emotional response. And it's all very amplified through our hormones too. And I don't know how much physically, like hormones do affect me physically, but I wonder how much of that is actually natural, or is that are the hormones, responding to, the whole collective of all women, and same with all men. Like, I don't really have an answer to that, but I wonder, like, do you have any thoughts on that, Iulian?
Yeah, I'm not thinking very much like in terms of hormones, but I feel that what needs to happen, what can help both men and women is the idea, the concept of balance.
Yes.
So we know we have a feminine and masculine part, and the feminine part is naturally more emotional, more expressive. But then when it's not balanced by the masculine, then it becomes too emotional, overwhelmingly emotional. emotion. And for men, it's different. Like men become too mental because they repress the expression of emotions, and they don't give even value to emotions. Some men think they don't need emotions even to, go through life. Beliefs and ideas out there. So I'm learning for myself, coming from this, from my childhood, to allow myself to express emotions, to cry if I feel to cry. It's not easy because I feel there is some resistance. Although I want to allow experiences that I haven't had before, it doesn't come easily. So it's like work in progress, but I feel, it's getting better.
Yeah, lovely. Okay, well, I'd say that's pretty much time now. Time to close our interview. So I'd just like to express my deepest gratitude to you, Iulian. It's been really amazing to listen to you flow and to speak and to express yourself, all your perspectives. And I just know there's plenty of other people who are going to get a lot out of it. And yeah, so thank you so much.
I want to thank you as well for the opportunity the idea, first of all. I think it's brilliant to have those interviews and have this very direct interaction and allow people to express much more than we express through writing in our group. It feels so much more fluid, and the connection is deeper and so much more direct. So I think we did something to move on to have more often those kind of connections.
Yeah. So I'm just starting to lose your voice now for some reason. So I think it's time to just basically say goodbye to our viewers. So farewell.
Bye-bye.
And until the next time, whoever that next interviewee is going to be here, be well.
Thank you, Neptune. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.